Mr. Norquist, what reasons do you believe that have been given so far that are credible in terms of not having the audit? I just have one quick point before I go to the other two questions real quick. Have size and complexity been used to complain about, or used as a reason why an audit has not been successfully completed so far?
That's one of the explanations, which is the size and the complexity. And part of it is, since most people in the organization hadn't experienced an audit before, you didn't have as much exposure to what it should look like. Whereas in Homeland, we had a number of groups who came together from places that had at least had an audit, even if they had struggled, and therefore they knew what to expect, and it was easier to train or coach them on what was coming.
Well, that's a great point. If you look at the size and complexity issue, my point coming from the business world is that the Department of Defense is only a little larger than Walmart. And I can't imagine Walmart calling the SEC or any other agencies and saying we're too large and complex to file our documents this quarter. So I agree with your point. Secondly, the spend it or lose it, you've commented briefly on that. Last year, or in 2015, we spent about $275 billion under contracts. And yet in the last week of the year, we spent 10% of the entire $275 billion in the last week of the year. Can you comment on that and what you would do to look at that?
Sure. I think there's two things that happen. One is an understandable hesitation if you don't know exactly how much you're going to have to move it, until you're certain how you're going to go. And so they save it up until the very end, and they're like, okay, now I got to spend it. So that's a consequence, a little bit of unpredictability. The other part is the use it or lose it effect of the legislation, which is...
So I'm sorry, can I expand on that point? So Congress's lack of consistent budgeting and timeliness of that budget could actually contribute to that. Is that what you're saying?
It could, but it doesn't have to be Congress. It could also be the headquarters of your organization. I mean, whoever's holding your money, if you don't know how much of it you're going to get, there's a temptation to make sure you can at least cover the essentials. And then when the additional comes down, you're like, oh, I can do more now. Right. So at any level where that occurs, you can have that challenge. The other effect, of course, is that O&M money expires. And this can create an incentive for people to use it or lose it. I think the point you were referencing is when Homeland Security was formed, they gave a provision in there that said, if you don't spend it, we will give you 50 cents for every dollar at the beginning of the next fiscal year. And I think the congressional intent on that was, if you not spend the dollar in exchange for 50 cents, it was probably a not exciting use of the dollar, and we'd like you not to do it. There's some pros and cons to that I would want to discuss before somebody did that, because there's some challenges in implementing. But there's been a series of efforts, I know, from different people to look at that and say, how do we discourage that sort of behavior?
Good. Mr. Daigle, today we acquire a lot of software, a lot of high-tech stuff, and yet the acquisition policies and regulatory schemes that govern those were developed in an era before the development of a lot of this technology. I mean, this iPhone, for example, has more computing power than NASA did, maybe, when we put men on the moon. The question I have is, there are outside groups like the Defense Innovation Board. I don't know if you guys are familiar with their work. How would you interact with someone outside to help us close that gap, to get back to the time when DOD was actually the leader in technology?
Senator, I completely agree. Even in terms of CAPE's cost estimation processes, they're not really in line with the way the private sector thinks about cost estimation for software development. So if confirmed, that's one of the things that I would look at. The Defense Science Board, for example, is coming forward soon. We've spoken with them several times about a report that they have ongoing to look at the way the department develops software, tests software, costs software, and deploys software to warfighters, and whether or not we can speed up that entire process in the same way that updates to your iPhone apps come out sometimes without your knowledge. I completely agree that software development is something that needs a look inside the department, and if confirmed, I would absolutely.
Right. Ms. McCusker, quickly, our acquisition process is in space. This is, again, a technology question. But the auditing of that, I know in business, the benefit of an audit is not necessarily just the financial issues. It's also comparing to best practices and that sort of thing. In a new area where there may not be best practices, how does an audit help us prepare for the next gen-up, if you will, in needs for our space defense?
I mean, I think, so the most immediate thing that comes to mind is it gives you a chance to do things right from the start. And so, if you have an audit when you're beginning a new activity, you've got the benefit of developing, the reporting structure and the systems and the way and the accountability that you would need for an audit. I can't speak specifically to the area that you're referencing, but I can look into that if confirmed.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.